Hey guys, have you heard of Goldbelly? It's this amazing site where they ship the most iconic, famous foods from restaurants across the country, anywhere, nationwide. I've never found a more perfect gift than food. They ship Chicago deep dish pizza, New York bagels, Maine lobster rolls, and even Ina Garten's famous cakes. So if you're looking for a gift for the food lover in your life, head to goldbelly.com and get 20% off your first order with promo code GIFT.
Look around. You can find cars like these on AutoTrader, like that car right in your tail. Or if you're tailgating right now, all those cars doubling as kitchens and living rooms are on AutoTrader too. Are you working out and listening to this ad at the same time? Well, multitasking pro, cars like the ones in the gym parking lot are for sale on AutoTrader. New cars, used cars, electric cars, maybe even flying cars. Okay, no flying cars, but as soon as they get invented, they'll be on AutoTrader. Just you wait. AutoTrader.
Hello, this is Simon Brew. I'm the editor of Film Stories magazine, and a very warm welcome to a very special episode of the Film Stories podcast.
Come with me.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
And movies that had stories.
That the story just sucks them in.
This is just the beginning.
Stories. We would be honored if you would join us.
Hello, and a very warm welcome to Film Stories with Simon Brew. I am Simon Brew. As always, that's absolutely everything you need to know about me. The aim of the podcast, though, is given away by its title. I'm here to talk of the stories of films, and I tend to talk about development stories, production stories, marketing stories, release stories, all the ingredients, really, that go towards making the films that we know and sometimes love. Just that, the films that we know and sometimes love. The films I tend to cover on this podcast lean more towards the mainstream than anything else. They're films I'm interested in or invested in to some degree. I try not to do snark. I try not to punch down. This podcast is a celebration of cinema and a real appreciation that somehow, films manage to get made. What you've happened upon here is one of my occasional special episodes of the podcast where I bring in a filmmaker to talk about their latest release and stroke or their body of work, and you get a bit of both in this particular episode because I'm delighted to be joined by producer Tommy Harper. Now, I've not seen that many interviews with Tommy Harper before, so he was an interesting one to chase and then to basically find, well, quite the story that you're about to hear, really. And so the high-profile stuff, he's the producer of Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. He's worked with Tim Burton on films as diverse as Big Eyes, Alice in Wonderland. That's going to come up in the conversation you're about to hear. Also, Big Fish pops up in there as well. There's a few other things too. I mean, Star Wars The Force Awakens, a producer on that. Jack Ryan, Shadow Recruit, a producer on that. Star Trek Into Darkness and Star Trek, they come up too. We're going to hear a few things just to put in your head just ahead of the conversation. A couple of things come up. First of all, we talk about Showgirls at one stage. I'll let you find out the context of that. The Paul and Joe that we talk about during that part of the chat, our director, Paul Verhoeven, and the film's writer, Joe Esterhaz. Paula Wagner was of Wagner Cruise Productions and one of the producers on many of the Mission Impossible movies. Her name pops up as well. Michael Eisner was the ex-head of Disney. It's me who brings him up. And then Vanessa Redgrave is mentioned in her context as in her role in the original Mission Impossible movie. I think those are all the notes you need going in. So, it's a good, deep chat, this. I hope you enjoy it. I certainly enjoyed recording it. I'm going to set it up with a clip from the trailer for Beetlejuice Beetlejuice, and you'll hear my conversation with Tommy Harper the other side of this.
Can't believe Grandpa's dead.
Death is hard.
Yeah, sometimes I think life is harder.
When I was a teenager, a trickster demon terrorized our entire family and tried to force me to marry him. I believed he was gone forever until you found this in the attic.
Ew. Who's Beetlejuice?
Don't ever say that name.
Beetlejuice.
No, Astrid! I am serious! If you say his name 3 times, he will appear.
Beetlejuice.
The juice is loose.
So that was a clip from the trailer for Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. I'm delighted to be joined by its producer and a man whose credits are, well, hopefully we're going to get into this. There's a enormous range of credits I just want to talk about. It's Tommy Harper. Hello, Tommy. How are you?
Hello, I'm good. How are you?
I'm not too bad, thank you very much. And we find you, we should point out, right on the eve of the release of Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. You've pretty much completed the press tour. The reviews have come out, press screenings have taken place. So what's this bit like the day before? Let me start with the boring question.
The day before is like waiting for your test scores to arrive, or like, you know, Christmas morning or something like that. It's a little intense, but you try to kind of distance yourself from it and remember the road, the journey that you traveled, and you try not to read everything online, and you just step back and just, I don't want to say enjoy the moment, but you just kind of like, you step back from it and just try to, for me, I try to wake up and do my daily routine and do what I do every day, and not to try to be too on top of everything. That will happen as the weekend goes on, but today I'm just trying to like get to tomorrow so everybody can see it.
So from us on the outside looking in, what happens over the opening weekend of a film when you're the producer? What time do the phone calls start coming in?
They've started. I mean, so we we start getting emails weeks in advance of tracking numbers, and then X amount of days out, and so you start to talk to distribution in the studio about the numbers and what you're projecting and things of that such, and then daily we're on text messages with, you know, I'm with Jeff Goldstein distribution, talking back and forth about like what's happening and what are the pre-sales, how the fan screenings, how are the early PLF screenings, premium large format happening, you know, which are happening today on Thursday, and then so you're talking about that, and then I would say a few times during each day you're getting some numbers reported, and you're just trying to see how things are trending for the weekend.
When you first broke into the film industry, you're working in an industry where the opening weekend was important, but it wasn't in the same way as it's often determined now, the be all and end all. But I'm also conscious you went through this with Top Gun Maverick, where an opening weekend number then kind of just kept going, which doesn't ordinarily happen. So where are your own feelers on it? I mean, are you still sat there waiting to be surprised?
I mean, I think for me, it's like the opening weekends, yes, you want to open big and have good numbers, good financial numbers, but I think the longevity of the duration in cinema is for us and is kind of like what we would prefer. So we would like to have a big opening weekend, but we want the film to stay in theaters for a long time and kind of have this continual financial income every week and every day. And that's kind of, you know, it's not just for the opening weekend for us. We Top Gun was a bit kind of took us by surprise, as you know, a little bit, and we opened big domestically and internationally, and then it just kept riding the wave. And that's kind of what we want to do for Beetlejuice as well. We want to be into October and honestly into November and have this film still being played in cinemas.
You look, obviously this is an audio podcast, so our listeners can't see you. You look a much younger man than me. And so, I mean, when Beetlejuice came out, I remember queuing up in the video shop to get the film. And you are clearly of an age of, you won't have heard of VHS. You're that much younger than me.
Yes. Go ahead. Sorry.
So, I mean, when did the original? It's an obvious question, I guess, but when did the original come into your life?
I would say so. I grew up away from film and television, and I grew up in a small town, kind of 3 hours north of Los Angeles.
Yeah.
So I loved the movies, I love television, and I love entertainment, but I did not have a clue what that world was like. So I would say Beetlejuice came into my world probably late teens, and because of the Halloween spirit and that nature of it. So I was aware of it, and I was aware of it because of VHS at the time, and going to Blockbuster and renting it. And I believe when the first DVD/VHSs that were sent out from Blockbuster was Beetlejuice. You can fact check me on that, but I believe that was a weird kind of world that we live in now. But that kind of, I remember it in I would say late teens, high school era, that even though it came out before that, for me, that's where I kind of realized what it was.
So that man who I mean that young boy who grew up three hours north of Los Angeles, to whom the movie business was a million miles away. How then do you get from that point to, by the mid 1990s, you're working on the set? What was your first film? Was it For Better or Worse?
Very good.
What was that path? It's not that good, is it? It's on IMDb, but I'll take the praise if you want. I don't mind.
Yeah.
But what was that path then? If you were so far out of the industry, how did it appeal to the point where you were then on a movie set?
Well, how it originated was simple, sports, basketball. I was a basketball kid growing up, played basketball, and I graduated high school, and I was asked to coach a summer basketball team. And one of the kids, I was 19, 20 years old, coaching kids probably 2 years younger than me. And one of the kids on the team's father, by the name of Steve Nicolaitis, was a producer for Rob Reiner in Los Angeles. And I was a kid trying to, quite honestly, coaching the basketball team, working at Foot Locker, and owned my own auto detailing business, whatever that means, as a 19-year-old kid that I started in high school. I was kind of just dreamt up one day, I'm going to move to Los Angeles and get into advertising. I had no clue what advertising was, but this kid on the team said, I talked to my father. I told him how much time you donated, for us, for the basketball team. And he said to me, if you ever get to Los Angeles, you can call him and he'll see if he's got a production assistant job for you. I did not know what that was, but I did call Steve. And when I was moving to LA, and called him repeatedly and begged him for a job and said, I'll sweep the floors, I'll do whatever. And he's like, I think we can do better than that, Tommy. And he said, call me as we approach the summer, and I have a movie that I'm hoping will be made. And that was For Better or For Worse. And he was true on his word and gave me a production assistant job at very low level, the number 7 PA on the set. And that's how I got my first job.
How did you get your second job then? Because if I've got this right, you then went from like basketball, moving to LA, advertising, to Showgirls, and your entire career trajectory is, I mean, it's just quite an odd one. I mean, it's almost, I suppose it's almost traditional in a way that you worked your way up from the down up. But still, Showgirls as a second film is quite something.
Yeah, there was one in between that, probably maybe the years, was Boy Called Hate, which was Steve Nicolaitis, the producer in the first movie, was doing this little independent movie called Boy Called Hate that I went and did every job known to mankind. I was the PA, I was the driving trucks because it was a non-union movie. I was the stunt double for Scott Kahn. I did everything on that movie. And that, between my first PA job, For Better or For Worse, who I met, an assistant director in that job, called me for Showgirls. And that's how I got into the job on Showgirls. And one of the assistant directors called me and said, we're shooting out of town, coming into Los Angeles, and we need somebody to run all the extras. And I was like, okay, what does that mean? He's like, go buy a SAG book, learn all the rules. And by the way, I'm probably 21 at this point, 20, and so I was 21. They thought I was under 18. They wouldn't let me on the actual set for the longest time. They thought that I looked like a baby. I mean, they were like, are you sure you're 18? And I was like, yes, I'm 18. I'm like 21 or whatever I was. And so I was in charge of all the extras, and I had no clue what that meant as well. I kind of like, just this career that I just started, it'll repeat itself. I just started jumping into things. And I think my sports background kind of helped me with that. I wasn't fearful of anything, and I just jumped in and tried to figure it out along the way.
How much of a sponge were you at that point, though? Because I remember following the production of Showgirls and the controversies around, but even like take away the tabloid side of it. That was Paul Verhoeven and Joe Esterhazy perhaps not getting on. They weren't quite as tight as they once were, and the tensions there. Were you conscious of a lot of that?
I wasn't conscious of too much of it. What I was conscious of was the probably the scale of the film, and the Paul Verhoeven at one of the heights of his career, and kind of like the intensity of making that movie and the drive that he actually had for it. I mean, the hours that we ended up shooting day by day were intense. There were 16, 17 hours a day we were working. So I remember as a kid hearing Joe Esterhaus and I knew who he was and I knew his career, but I remember the hearing like they don't get along, he's not on the set, it's Paul's vision on the set and all that stuff. But I was very separated from that because I was, the kid just showing up and doing the job and making $100 a day.
So the reason I asked that, it's not as titillation as it might sound. My first job was working in a petrol station, and I remember watching the bosses argue at the petrol station. Then by the time I was in a role where I had some responsibility, I remembered how they acted. I'd absorbed without knowing how the people around me on my first jobs have acted, and it sort of informed the kind of person I was becoming 10, 15 years later. I'm just trying to get to how invaluable these experiences were, because you've just done a small film, a medium film, a large film, just as your first 3 movies.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. It was invaluable. It was my training, my school. That was how I learned. And I did sit back and watch and learn and take it all in, because it also was at a time where that movie was a lot of money. And I saw from the, I would say from the Joe and Paul world of it, what was happening there. And I was kind of like a fly on the wall. I saw what the studio was talking about on that movie, because schedule was overrun. We were spending a lot of money. So I was absorbing all of that and taking every bit of it in. And I would also say, oddly, because we kept shooting longer and longer and longer on that movie, my job kept changing on that movie. So I started like as a kid who was watching the door and not letting people come into the set, to be in charge of hundreds of extras, to, oh, you know what, now the person that was in charge of the dancers is gone too, so you're going to be in charge of the dancers as well. So I was in charge of all this world. And then it was all of a sudden, okay, we believe you, you're above 18, come on the set and start setting all the extras and be in charge of the placement of. So I was on the set with Paul watching him direct. And so for me, I was just taking everything in on probably a span of 6-7 months. And it was probably years of education that just absorbed in my brain in that time period. So it was hugely beneficial.
Because the films you were doing immediately afterwards, as I understand it, were a David Lynch movie, a Meryl Streep movie, a big Jim Carrey movie as well. And with all due respect to the other people who were credited as production assistant or set production assistant on those films, I would imagine most of them haven't produced a Mission Impossible movie in their future. Right. So when did it turn? What was the bit that let you spark, if you like, that said this isn't now a job, this actually could be a career, this could be something I could do?
I think during I would say I knew on For Better or For Worse, this was going to be my career.
That quickly.
That quickly. I was still figuring out at that point. I thought to myself, I'm going to move to Los Angeles. I'm going to get my grades up and I'm going to go to film school at either UCLA or USC. That was my dream. I dreamt big. I wasn't great in school. The grades were struggling. But I remember being on that set and it was being shot over the summer. And I remember USC kids coming up to me as I was at a lockup holding traffic for pedestrians. And these kids came up and gave me their resume and said, can you please pass this on to somebody? We're looking for a job. And we just graduated SC. And I remember the light bulb went off in my head of I have this opportunity to sit standing on the other side where these kids on that have the film school degree are looking for a job, and I have a job. So I just chose a different path, and I knew this was going to be my career. Now, I didn't know which part of the career. I think that probably came on during probably a little bit later, because I was like, being an assistant director will be great. Maybe I'll direct. I was kind of all over the place. I knew I wanted to either direct, produce, or be an assistant director. And then I quickly realized, I think on my probably Liar world, that era, that I wanted to produce. And I just chose the path of how do I get to producing as fast as possible?
Yeah.
And I can tell you, what pivotal moment where that happened. Which was during the Mission Impossible movie, Mission Impossible 3, JJ Abrams directing, I realized I wanted to be a producer. I kind of was given the opportunity to, as a second assistant director, I was given a lot of opportunity to deal with the planning and logistics and kind of how to structure a movie and move a company from A to B and from the Europe to Los Angeles. And I got I was very fortunate with the producers I was working with, and even Paula Wagner, to let me inside and figure out and see how the producing side worked. And then after Mission Impossible, JJ Abrams, I saw him at a restaurant and he was writing Star Trek. And random Sunday, and I saw him at a restaurant and said hi. And he said to me, have you talked to the producer at the time, and has he called you, because we're going to start Star Trek and I want you to do it. And I was very honest with him, and I just said, I don't want to do that job anymore, so I'm not sure if I'm going to be working on the movie, but thank you very much. He's like, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to produce, but obviously there's steps. And he goes, well, why don't you production manage? And that kind of pivoted, and within 24 hours, I would say the studio called and said, come in for a meeting, let's figure this out. And I went in and they basically said, we'll figure out, why don't you start immediately, because we need JJ needs help. We need to do casting and art design and all this stuff, and the producers need help kind of figuring this out. So why don't you start as an assistant director? We'll pay you as assistant director. You'll start doing all that stuff, but you'll production manage portion of the movie. And at that point, I was just going to do the second unit. And so basically what ended up happening was I production managed the second unit of the movie. I pre-prepped. I'm talking like the script wasn't even written, and I was going in and we were trying to find Kirk. So I was helping wrangle JJ to casting sessions and organize with his office and casting and Paramount and get everything, so it was, once again, I just jumped in and started figuring it out. And then when they were like, you'll do the second unit, and as a production manager watching the financials of the movie and kind of logistics, I had no clue how to read a budget. So I was handed a budget, and then that led into also kind of co-production managing the main unit. And I remember sitting down with our production accountant going like, I'm sure I can do this. Like, but how do I read this? And she Kathy Petty was her name. And she showed me how to go through it and what to look for. And that was my intro into that side of the world. And it was an opportunity that I just spoke up, and somebody offered it to me, and I just took it and I went with it. And, it sounds all very easy. There was a long road to that day, but it was one of those moments where I just spoke up in the room when somebody asked me what I wanted to do.
So say I'm a set assistant on the set of Beetlejuice 9 or something like that, and I catch you in a restaurant and I say I want to produce. What would your response be now that the whole ecosystem of movies has moved on, 20 years from Mission Impossible 3?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like, here's the thing is, at the time I knew what there's like a physical and a creative producer, and then but I was also working for producers a little bit later on, but that kind of did both. I would say, like, that knew how to do both. And what I would say now is you kind of figure out like what type of producer you want to be. And I think as a producer, you have to know both sides of the road. You have to know the physical and the creative, and even know, oddly enough, the film industry is kind of a little antiquated. It's kind of still stuck in time where you kind of take these both paths, and I think like good producers, Jerry Bruckheimer's, Dick Zanuck's of the world, the ones I've worked with, that have know how to do both and do them really, really well. And I think you need to know how to do both. So I would say to anybody who comes up to me, and the people who come up to me and say, oh, I would like to talk to you about producing, I would say, okay, well, what are you doing to be a producer? Are you a student of film? Are you, what are you doing to learn the craft? What are you doing to learn how movies are made? Do you want to know how movies are made or how to make movies? And I think you just have to put in the work, and if you want to kind of jump the line a little bit, then what you need to do is pair yourselves up with creatives that are writers or directors that you feel passionate about that maybe you've met along the way that may kind of have a film that they're going to get into a festival or something like that. But you have to do the work. That's part of it, you know.
Part of your story was a gamble, though, as well,
Yeah.
wasn't it? From what you were saying. So I'm reading. I mean, there's a parallel actually. I'm currently reading Daniel Stern's autobiography, and he talks about how he just took he knew he wanted to act. He took a gamble. He went to New York with no money, and his parents backed him. And I'm just wondering, at the point you were like 19 and doing that jump to Los Angeles, was there an ecosystem around you that was backing you? Were there people trying to talk you out of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, listen, I'm the only person who's left my hometown, you know, and 3 hours north feels like, oh, it's only 3 hours north, but it is a world away, especially when
in the UK, that's like different country. Don't worry, I've got you there.
Yeah, and when I left, and you know, I think my parents were not fearful, but they were very much like, they were supportive. But it was at a time where no, we weren't financially. I had to survive on my own. When I was working as a PA, and when I first started out, I was working the weekends, washing all the trailers on the sets and the cars to make money for rent. That's how because you made no money as a PA. You made $100 a day, no matter how many hours you worked. And then on the weekends, the transportation and the producers were very nice to me, and I'd wash all the trailers and steam clean the carpets and wash the town cars that the actors are driven in, you know, every Saturday and Sunday. And that would pay my rent and the food for me to continue working. So I had support of my family. Nobody said, don't, you know, oh, you're going to fail. They were all very supportive, but nobody quite understood what I was doing. It was a big leap of faith. And I kind of went with a friend who was going to college, and I was the one going to work. And so I had this kind of world where friends were in college and I was the crazy person working all the time. And so it was a leap of faith, and it was a gamble, and it was something that I just, what I say to people is, you have to do something you love. And I knew right away I loved it. That's something that I was fortunate. I found it, and I just loved it, and I wanted to do it.
You've got, before I jump to your producing work, you do have a film on your resume which I really like, and I've never talked to anyone who's worked on it before. It seems odd to pull it out as an underrated film, but 1999's Life, directed by Ted Demme, which I thought was a really smart and bold career move for Eddie Murphy at that point where he was building his career. Can you, I mean, and obviously Ted Demme, a terrible loss to the film world. Can you just as someone who's worked on that film, just capture something of that movie for me?
I mean, that movie was, you're right. It was at a time, Ted Demme doing that movie was a total shift in his kind of like world, what he was doing. And Eddie and Martin were at the height of their career. I mean, they were massive stars, right? I mean, they still are, but it was Hollywood at its peak, I would say, between Liar Liar and that movie. And that movie was a lot of fun. And I think Ted, to work with, was just seeing him as this kind of like wild man filmmaker was a lot of fun to see. And once again, I was like a person coming up through the ranks. I was kind of, it was a little pre my JJ conversation, where I was also given the opportunity. For me personally, I was just getting into the Assistant Directors Guild. That's what that time period was for me. I was accepted into the Directors Guild. I had to go work out of town a certain amount of hours, and the studio and the producer was like, we were shooting up in Sacramento, and I was in charge of going up there and setting up the company and dealing with it. And then also kind of like another part of my job of the movie was kind of, you know, making sure Ted was organized and prepped, you know, as some of the days went. And so for me, it was, once again, it was show up to work and do the job, and you never knew what was going to happen every day. But it was a time period where Ted was you know, he died way too young, but he was, to watch him work, because I was a huge fan of his movies, was really, really cool and fun. And just to see him do something totally different, a comedy, and Eddie to do dramatic stuff was a blast, to sit there and just be an observer.
So I mean, again, reading the list of movies, it's interesting talking to you because usually I come in with a preordained list of questions, but there aren't. I mean, there aren't that many interviews with you out there. There's quite a lot of secrets to your story, I think.
Yeah.
And I mean, I see a gap, for instance, from Big Fish, which came in, which I think is your first time working with Tim Burton. I do eventually get to the point, you'll notice. From Big Fish, and then 13 years later, you were producing Big Eyes with them. I just wonder, can you capture those two projects and the gap between them?
Well, I mean, Tim and I have a very interesting kind of relationship in how we met. I met Tim on a personal level first through my wife, who was friends with him. Yeah, and so I knew Tim years before I worked on Big Fish, and then Big Fish, we worked together, had a great time working together. And then what it ended up happening, why there was so much of a gap was I went into the JJ Abrams world for a while and doing the treks and the missions and into Bad Robot. Yeah. And Tim and I always stayed connected between those time periods. And I would jump in from time to time and help him out on getting projects set up or doing, some planning for him. And it just our stars never aligned where I was available to work on his movies. And, there was a movie, Ripley's Believe It or Not, that Tim was going to direct, that I was talking to them about going to China and being in charge of the China unit. And so they just, over the course of all these years, nothing kind of lined up. And then what ended up happening on Big Eyes was he Home for Peculiar Children. I helped do the planning and the first board and the budget and get it to the studio and be the liaison between the studio and Tim. And I think this was right after Dick Zanuck had passed away. So I kind of helped bridge that gap for Tim with the studio. And then as we were getting that thing up and going for him, I was prepping one of the Mission Impossible movies. Yeah. And so we knew I couldn't do the movie, but I said to Tim, I'm going to help you out on this because of our relationship. And I want to continue working with you at some point in the future. So I just did this in parallel while I was prepping one of the missions. And then while we were getting that movie, I was with him one day and with some of his team. And he said, I actually think I want to go do this movie first. This is Big Eyes. And we read the script and I got on the phone with Mike Simpson, his agent, and we realized we had to do it for a number, figure out how to do it for under a certain number. And then we quickly got that going. And that was my working with him again on Big Eyes. And at the same time was Peculiar Children. And so, yeah, that's kind of how that worked. And I think Alice was that Alice before that?
Alice was just before as well, wasn't it? That's 2010. So, I mean, it's interesting hearing you talk. I just wonder what that 19-year-old would think. Just hearing this person talk about saying casually, I was preparing a mission movie or a Trek movie or something like that. I mean, it was quite a fast path, really, if you just map it out on just on a piece of paper from that first movie to the Bad Robot time. And if I've got this right as well, did you get up to COO of Bad Robot? There was
COO of Bad Robot. It was very fast, and I think it was one of the things that happened really fast for me was I never stopped working as a production assistant. I mean, I did because in the film industry, I tell young kids, like, you get freaked out. It's a industry where you go do a movie and then you have time off and you're looking for your next job. And I remember, eating 99-cent, burritos as my meal because I was between jobs and freaking out if I'd ever work again. You know what I mean? So I do remember those times and I remember those a lot. And that what keeps, like, we'll get to another thing of like, I personally just don't look at what I've done in the past. And I just keep doing, what's in the moment in the future but it was a fast path where I was working, getting, my days to join the DGA. Once I was in the DGA, I just kept working. And what was, I think one of the ones that kind of shocks me a little bit is the path where I was working for JJ Abrams and Bad Robot a lot. I got introduced to Tom Cruise. We had done Mission 3 and 4 together. And then I was doing one of the Star Treks and Paramount called and was like, we want you to go produce Jack Ryan. And then as I was doing Jack Ryan, we shot that movie, wrapped that movie. I was back in the States doing pickups on Star Trek Into Darkness with JJ, and we were casually sitting in his office, in between, you do these little pickups in his studio office area in Santa Monica, and he turns to me and says, have you talked to Kathy yet? We gotta get this thing going, Star Wars. And I was like, wait, what are you talking about? And he completely blindsided me because he had thought there had been a prior conversation. He was like, no, I'm going to direct Star Wars, and you're going to produce it, and this is all going to come out in the next few days, but we need to get you in front of Kathy. And that to me was another change in my career, where it kind of just, I went, oh, my life's going to change. Yeah.
Just on a point of clarification, 3 days before an announcement was going out saying you were producing Star Wars, you didn't know you were producing Star Wars.
Yeah, I thought I was doing a different Mission Impossible movie. I was in the midst of post-production on Jack Ryan for Paramount, helping like sitting in a kitchen at midnight with JJ doing Star Trek Into Darkness pickups, and then helping Christopher McQuarrie prep one of his Mission Impossible movies, was all kind of going around. And then yes, JJ turned to me and was like, no, you're not going to do the mission. You're going to do Star Wars. We're going to go do that.
I mean, just some of the films you mentioned there: Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, Jack Ryan, Beetlejuice, Star Wars. You like the UK, right?
I shoot a lot in the UK. Yes, it's almost like a second. I spend about a half a year at times in the UK. Yeah, yes, half my time.
If I can I just want to go back. This is just the Mission Impossible nerd for me. Can you clear something up for me? Mission Impossible 3. Was Vanessa Redgrave ever going to come back? I remember the rumor at the time.
I don't think so. I think that, because there was very iterations. It was like Joe Carnahan's Mission 3, and then there was
the
JJ. So in ours, no, she wasn't. Yeah.
I always
and that was
that. Thank you.
Yeah, and that to me, just Mission 3 was like my first. I'd done big movies, but that was my first big globe-trotting, massive film that I think changed my international work.
So, I mean, as a producer, when you've got a huge film like that, like a Mission Impossible film or something like that, where you've got these big action sequences. I mean, as a kid, I used to read loads about the making of films, not the classy films, like the films I was tending to watch. So I remember, for instance, when they were making Lethal Weapon 3, and they got a call in saying, there's a building downtown that you can blow up. Can you write that into your film? And they wrote that into the film. And I'm just curious, when you're developing these films, particularly of the scale you're doing, how separate, how intertwined is the planning of the big set piece stuff against the broader story, the more tighter story stuff that has to be woven in?
I mean, they're connected. I mean, obviously, it starts with story. Story is the king of everything. It has to,
which I do get.
Yeah, and you have to feel the characters and the emotion. But when you do these action films, you do need big set pieces, right? So what you tend to do is write the action set pieces within the story, or sometimes, depends on the director or the writer, sometimes the action set pieces drive the story, right? And you center stuff around it, but it all comes full circle. But you do, like, Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, we were looking for kind of like anomalies and what was around the world, and tallest building in the world. What if he climbed out of that? Could we climb out of that? Yes, we can. How do we do it? And that became a set piece in our film. And so you kind of sometimes, that movie was, we went around with the writers and tried to figure out big landmarks, big events happening in time, and kind of give the writers these set pieces, and then they wrote around them. That's kind of how Mission Impossible 4, that's what kind of how the action movies do happen. You figure out set pieces, or I always wanted to do a squirrel diving sequence, and how do we weave that into the film? Yeah, so they're fun.
I mean, hearing you talk here and looking at the roles you've done before, when you're on set as a producer, as politely as I can put it, your bullshit radar must be quite something. Because presumably, if a relatively junior person on the set comes up to you and says, I can't do that, you're in the position of saying, I used to have your job, and there was a way to do it. Is that kind of bedrock of experience, or I presume it's of use?
Yeah, I think I would say yes. I mean, I I tend to produce now where I think my just speaking candidly, my producing kind of method over the last 10 plus years have changed a little bit. Whereas when I was a young producer coming up, I was a little more micromanageable. Some people may say, laugh and say, Tommy still micromanages, but I do it in a different way. Like somebody comes up to me and says, oh, I don't think I can do that. I would say now to them, if I know in the back of my mind, it can be done. I would say, I think it can be done. And I think you'll find a way to do it. And I'll empower them to try to go figure it out. I think the advantage I have of where I came from is since I was a PA and I actually worked with a lot of departments, and because as I was joining the Directors Guild, at that time you had to go work a certain amount of days out of California to be able to work everywhere, meaning you got accepted to the DJ. I had to go work, I think 200 days or 150 days out of California to be able to work back into California. So as I was waiting for jobs to get out of California as an assistant director, I had to pay my bills. So I contacted all my friends in the film industry, and I worked in sound, I worked in post-production, I worked in locations, I worked in pretty much across the board in every department. So I don't know it like at a expert level every single department, but I do know what it takes, and I do know how things can be differently done certain ways. And I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of talented HODs and filmmakers, and I've seen things done on a different level as well. So I think that's what helps me. And I think when somebody comes up and says something like that, oftentimes I'll just say, well, I bet you can figure it out. I know you can figure it out. Let's go figure out how to do this, a right way, or not the right way. Let's go see what you can do and present it back to us. And you kind of just empower people to do their job. Yeah.
I think it was a Michael Eisner interview, wasn't he, where he said micromanaging is underrated.
It really is. I mean, I listen, I know everything that's going on. I do on all my movies, and I have, I think 5 things happening at the present moment. And I do know what's happening at a level on every film, but I tend to hire really, really great people I get along with, people I have open dialogue with, and I let them do their job. And I know what's happening day to day because I call them every day and I check in with them, and they'll let me know what's happening on a certain level. And sometimes I'll get the phone calls and I'll hear what's happening on the minutia level, but I'll think to myself, and my wheels will be going and saying, oh no, this is a bigger problem coming up. I'm only knowing about the minutia level because they're worried about something trickling at a higher level. So it's the radar senses, I think, of my experiences is I can see different things and kind of project things happening kind of in the future in a weird way. I never nobody likes surprises. And I'm the person who never wants a phone call and a surprise on a random Wednesday,
I've mentioned producing and I've mentioned the UK. And before I just turn to Beetlejuice, just for the last part of this, I do want to ask this, because I've run magazines that talk to a lot of independent filmmakers in the UK. And in particular, what independent filmmakers over here have been telling me is if you're outside of London, there is an absolute lack of producers who know how to get films made. That the role of the producer is still, I think it's still somewhat mysterious to people, just because you can't nail down a job description per se. But when new filmmakers are coming through now, they're going. I've got a kid at film school, and that everyone wants to be a writer, everyone wants to be a director, nobody wants to be a producer. But without the producers coming through, it can't be knitted together. Are you getting that sense in America as well? I mean, is that a common problem throughout the industry, do you think?
I actually, yes, I do think it is. Especially during, pre-pandemic and when all the product, so much stuff was being made. I would say, I think there is a there's a lack of, I think, producers that are doing certain tiered films or television as well, like high end and dealing with high end talent. It is a gift, and it's really hard to do these jobs with at a certain scale. And now it's becoming, you don't have the budgets you used to have, and you have to you have to think of them doing them on a different way that we've always done in the past, and try to trim costs and, just be physically responsible. So I do think we have to groom our younger talent to be producers, and it's really hard to do that, and because sometimes people don't know what they want to do right away, or just giving people an actual shot, and there's no mentor program that kind of does this.
Yeah.
So I do feel like there is a lack of producer out there, and it is a mysterious job, and it changes every day and it evolves every day, and you can't produce the same way you produce one project to the next. You really have to kind of evolve with your director and your talent. So I think there's a shortage of producers, but I do think there's a lot of great producers out there that are still working today. Yeah.
Me being an old nerd who remembers video shops and things like that, I remember Beetlejuice in Hawaii. I remember like reading in print magazines. Remember those?
Yeah.
I remember reading in print magazines all the attempts to get more Beetlejuice films going over the years.
Right.
Now, I also read that, say, for instance, with Indiana Jones, the reason the last Indiana Jones film happened in the end was Harrison Ford really wanted to do it. That was the spark, that there was something, that there'd been this intent to do another film, but there had to be the thing to get it over the line. A very long way round to ask the question that you can see coming a mile off. What was it? Because I see in the story, for instance, Seth Grahame-Smith, who nearly got this going at one point, is credited in there. What finally made it happen? What was the eureka moment?
I think it was Tim. A light bulb went off in his head, like, this is the moment, this is the time, I need to do this now. That sounds like, okay, well, how does that happen? When we were filming Wednesday and we were in Romania, we were in the middle of filming it. I think Tim had this, he started making stuff again and feeling really happy doing it, and was having a really good time. And partly because, honestly, we stripped away everything, and just, it was all about the creative. And we were in Romania having a blast, working with artisans that was inspiring him, and sculptors, and working in locations that were inspiring. And it was a moment where he said to me, every time I'm on press tour, every time I'm opening up an art gallery or whatever it is, people ask me, when are you making another Beetlejuice movie? And he said, I feel like now we got to do it. Now's the time. It has to be now. If it doesn't happen now, it won't happen. And I think he was at a point in his life where it was years later where he felt an insight into the story of, where is Lydia Dietz now, and what has happened into her life. And I think it just clicked to him of, the story was there. And there was all these, iterations of, like you said, Beetlejuice goes to Hawaii, and all these different scripts, and he didn't ever really respond to them, and he never really kind of like got into them really much. And I think, people were trying to write scripts and throw in front of him and get him excited, and he never really took bait. And I think on this one, it was, where's Lydia? Oh, there's a death that occurred. Lydia has a daughter. What is that world like? And it just clicked for him, and we just immediately started developing.
If I talk to a director, usually they would say that the film that they've made is some kind of response to the one that they've just done before, or the project that they've just done before. You've sort of hinted it there, that there's a through line from Wednesday to Beetlejuice. How does that work with a producer? How do you get? Is it instant that you get the thirst when a key collaborator says, "This is what I want to do"?
Yeah, for me, I everybody always asks, I get a lot of questions like, how do you pick your projects and this and that? And I tend to pick on talent and filmmakers. And so for me, it's when Tim came to me and said, I love working with Tim, and I will do anything Tim asks. And so for me, it was immediately, that movie was like, yes, let's do it. And I think for us, it was really, the only relation to Wednesday was we were having a really good time making it. And the inspiration. And I think for me, with other projects, it's like, it's my relationships and the talent that I work with. And quite frankly, wanting to make product or material, I should say, in films or television that people want to see, and they want to. What I remember as a kid, one of my all-time favorite movies is going into a cinema, the lights coming down, being transported into a different time and place where I don't know what, I just am having fun, or I'm engaged in the story, and kind of slipping away for 2 hours. And those are the things I want to make. And those are the things that kind of transport me from product, from job to job or project to project. And I think when you're making something with people that you really like and enjoy working with, that inspires you to go on to make the next thing, I will say.
But I mean, say, like, let's go back to that Star Wars example. Say JJ Abrams said, "This is the film I want to make." You looked at a script. JJ Abrams loved it. You didn't love it. What would you do in that situation? I think,
I mean, I think, and those moments, sometimes happen where you you talk about something, you think it's going to be, not to say Star Wars, but just you talk about something, you start developing it, you read the script and you go, this isn't what I thought, but you know that the players involved can get there. And I think you just be honest and you have the conversation, because sometimes it's not it could just be one little thing that triggers that maybe you go, I don't know about this one. But I think I have a very good spidey sense. I there's a lot of things that's not even on IMDb that I'm working with people on that I've either gotten phone calls, or there's a nugget of an idea, or
is this my Showgirls 2 exclusive?
Exactly. But you're developing, and sometimes there's I just have a gut check thing that I pretty quickly realized, like, this could be really interesting and fun to do. Now, you never know what the end product will be. You never know if people are going to love it. There could be a tough thing when you release a movie and just people's moods are differently, or whatever it is. But I just have a sense of like liking things, or liking people, or liking the material. It's it doesn't mean it's going to be a home run, but that's just for me.
The reason I ask it you is because I ask it to directors a lot, and I'm just curious to ask a producer, because presumably it's as much, if you make the wrong choice for you, you're on location somewhere for 4 months having hell. I'm not applying this to any of your previous, but that decision is as potent to you as it is to the filmmaker, to the director and the actor.
It's a huge decision, and it's also, it's years of your life in development, shooting, and post, and I think it's like, so it is a big decision, and it's a decision you kind of have to. How I look at it now is, do I want to spend all this time and effort working on this project, or doing this, or partnering with this person, and not to just jump on it and go, oh, it's another whatever it is, or I'm working with this person, let's go. You kind of got to step back and look at it and go, I need to, because I also look at it as effort and results, right? Like, how much effort and what is the result, and how many of these can you do at the same time, right? Like, I'm into the world now of I'm not just doing one project and then the other project. It's like, it's usually 3 to 4 things happening at one time. So you kind of got to look at it and go, all right, yes, this is worth all my energy and time, and I want to do it. And those projects, and to me, it's like, it is the talent you're working with, and it's the story you're working with. And that's how I kind of like register it, I would say.
So Beetlejuice specifically, and I've not seen the film. You have. The reviews are out now. The reviews seem to be on your side as well. Early tracking, from what I read from my dingy little room in the West Midlands here, it is all looking very good. Take me to, say, I don't know, day 23 of the shoot, when you're in the actual mechanics of making the film. What did it all look like then compared to now?
I think what it looked like then is, you're in the middle of shooting, and you're just you're literally trying to get to the next day, right? And this was also it kind of like it's really nice to see where we are now, because mid shooting is is a very stressful time, and especially for Tim and on this movie, because we made this movie on a budget, and for a studio tentpole big film, we made it under $100 million, and we made it on a 40, I think we shot 46 days and then did some hiccups, as we were cutting.
46.
Yeah, we shot it on not a long schedule whatsoever. And most people just go, what? Like, because these movies shoot 70 days now or whatever it is, and so it was a very stressful time, I think. And for us to get from where we were then into where we are now it's really fun. And because I think, but we had fun making it. It wasn't like it was every day was just grueling. I mean, Tim, we had a blast, and to walk down on the set and see all the Afterlife people. And I think also what is fun in Tim's world is you're creating as you go. So you're in the middle of production, and we had 77 sets on this movie. So when you see the movie and on a schedule of only, 40 plus 46 days or whatever, you're changing sets rapidly. So every day you're shooting, you're prepping, for the next week and the week after that and the week after that, and things are just flying and it's hard. And Tim's coming up with ideas and saying, oh, the sequence coming up next week is a musical number. We need to make sure that we got this and that. And I need this prop and that prop. And so it's all organic and evolving all the time. So, I mean, they're a lot of fun. They're really hard. The crew gave all their effort into it, and it shows on the screen. And I think everybody really had even though it was hard, they had a blast making it, because it's also one of those movies where people are making things with their hands every single day. They're running down to the supermarket or the store and going to the toy store and grabbing a doll and ripping everything out of it and rebuilding it. So everybody just had so much fun making it.
I just love the image of all the crew of Beetlejuice down the local Tesco Express here in the UK. Just like, perfect.
I mean, it's a blast. It's a lot of fun. It's fun to see them do it too, and to have fun. And a lot of people came up to me and said, thank you, because I've had this kind of lot, and I'm not just saying this a lot. There's been people that said, I've had the most fun on this is one of the most fun film sets I've ever done working. And other people saying to me, thank you for bringing my creative, inspiration back, because I've been working on movies where things just go to CG or they fix it later. And that's not that's not what you and Tim want to do. You want to have it in front of camera, built for real. And a lot of people just got, re-energized.
And so we're pretty much out of time. I do just want to touch on another film you've got in post-production as well, because talking about the choices that you're making, you have Beetlejuice going alongside Flowervale Street from David Robert Mitchell. And I say this as someone who was genuinely unnerved by It Follows. Horror does not get under my skin at all as a rule. It Follows is the only one in the last 10 years that's really messed me up. So can you give us anything on that film? Can you tell us a little bit and how you were involved in that?
Well, I mean, this is kind of answers another question you asked earlier. It's like we were in the midst of getting Beetlejuice going. I was in London, woke up to an email from JJ, said, what are you doing? I know you're in the midst of Beetlejuice. How's your time? And because I love the man and I love working with him. And I said, time's not a problem. And yes, in the middle of Beetlejuice, what do you got going on? And then he just said, do you want to produce a movie for us and for his company? And he said, let's talk. And we got on the phone, had the conversation. I talked to the director, met the director. I read the script, obviously. And it's a totally different movie. And I watched David's film, and I knew his film, and I rewatched it. And I love the movie that we're doing. And I think it's really fun and different. And I think David is he's it's not too dissimilar to Tim. He's a creator of his world. And what you want to do is sit back and support these filmmakers and give them what they need and what they want, and kind of let them do their thing. And so it's a lot of fun. And I think it's with Warner's again. It's Warner Brothers. And so that was a easy kind of fit.
Yeah.
And I think it's for us, it's like, it's David Robert Mitchell doing what he does, but in a kind of studio genre type film, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And we're in post-production on it right now.
And have you had any more emails off JJ Abrams in the last week or two?
No, not in the last week or two, but we talk regularly. But it's a lot of fun to work with these filmmakers. But that's a good example of, like, I think when Tim, JJ, Tom, and Joseph Kaczynski, and there's probably a few others, Jerry, when they email or call, it's kind of like, let's just figure out how to do this, and don't worry about my time. I'll know where to be, and we'll figure out how to all make sure we get what we want.
Tommy Harper, this has been an absolute delight talking to you. It feels only fair at the end of this just to say, give us your line selling Beetlejuice to us. I have to go this weekend. My daughter's insisting. That's why I can't go to the press screening.
I'm glad you're going to see it. I think everybody, listen, we just want you to see Beetlejuice because we feel like Tim Burton is back. He's doing what he does best. Michael Keaton is back. We have a great cast. It's a great story. And I think everybody's going to be surprised of how much of a heart there is in this story. And it's actually a beautiful story. And it's really, really a fun movie to be transported for an hour and a half into a different world.
Tommy Harper, have a terrific weekend, and I hope all the phone calls are very good and upbeat ones. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
And that was Tommy Harper. Beetlejuice is in cinemas around the world from, right now, at the point this podcast is being released. And it all brings to an end this latest special episode of Film Stories. As always, thank you so much for listening, and thank you for your time. You can find more from me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Simon Brew. Crikey, I'm good at that. You can find the entire Film Stories project at Film Stories on both of those platforms. We're also on Instagram and Threads at Film Stories Magazine UK. Facebook.com/Film Stories Online. YouTube.com/Film Stories as well. Then, if you go to store.filmstories.co.uk, you will find all of our print magazines for sale. We are a huge believer in print publishing, in film magazines, and our independent film magazines are all waiting for you there. Filmstories.co.uk is our entertainment website. It is clickbait free. Imagine that, clickbait free. And so that's filmstories.co.uk. And if you really like this podcast, as well as liking and subscribing, thank you. If you want to head to patreon.com/Simon Brew, you get ad-free versions, gossip of what we're up to behind the scenes, and also you usually get the podcast early as well. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your time. That's the end of this episode. I will be back with your regular episode of Film Stories shortly. Until then, you all look after yourselves, and bye-bye.